Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. And Rich Scheben's with us. And I don't think we're going to be taking calls today, but we do have a telephone listen line. That number is 712-770-9418. 712-770-9418. This week's schedule for the balance of the week is Gwyneth is on Wednesday. Gwyneth Isaacs live in Australia. Thursday, it's me. And I'm going to be talking about tips from my book, Do-It-Yourself Tips. Now, if you have followed any of the advice, counsel, suggestions that we've made here on USA Prepares, and if you'd like to call in on Thursday and talk with me and tell us whether it worked or didn't work and your reactions to trying some of the things we suggested, that would be the day to do it. Now, the number to call in on Thursday is 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. That's for Thursday. Then Friday, Sharon's going to be with us, Sharon in Montana, and she is going to be talking about the prepared pantry, how to do it, the way she does it, the way we do it, the way we know that it works. I'm talking about Sharon and her family and me and my family, how we do it. So the prepared pantry, what you need to think about, consumption rates, how to do it, practical tips. And Sharon called me, Rich Scheben, and she said, I'd like to come on the air and I'd like to talk about, Rich Scheben talks about solutions. She said, I'd like to do a broadcast on solutions. And so she's going to be on 2 hours on Friday with me talking about solutions. And she, one of the things I've noticed, Rich Scheben, is that we pick up on terms that others have used, other instructors. And so, for example, when Rich and I are on the phone, he will use expressions from Gwyneth Isaacs. Isn't that right, Rich Scheben?
Yeah, I mean, we do it kind of sarcastically, a little fun. And I'll say, as Gwyneth says, does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah.
Little things like that. Or, you've called me for years and you go, hey. And I'll say, so when you call me, I go, hey. And, Dave, that man who's been through so much, I think, what was he, from Michigan? I can't remember.
He's from Illinois.
Illinois, yeah. And, I remember one time I called you up. I said, hey, Vince, I'm going to start saying, when you introduce me, I'm going to start saying, hey, how you doing? And you know what? A lot of it's fun because, when we're on the air, folks, and whether I'm monologuing or guest hosting or just my normal Tuesday or whatever day I show up on, our job is to wake up the public. Our job is to talk about how we're being distracted, dumbed down, and divided. Our job is to show how the little guy, the bottom 93%, is getting wealth redistribution taken from them and given to the elite. Our job is to show how the elite have delegitimized work and have dumbed us down and given us way less options as a people. And we don't even have the rule of law, restitution, and rights anymore, depending on what group you're in. And the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job has been so lowered, we are literally giving free lunch to the elite who have sold out to the highest bidder and literally eliminated our options. So, getting a little fun and sarcastic and throwing a few jokes in here and there, kind of like when I talked about the you made a comment how you liked my cockroach dental floss joke the other day. You know, it's so. Yeah. I have so much stuff, Vince. I mean, I'm looking at my notes in front of me right now, never mind the articles I have ready for today. I could probably monologue for the rest of the week. Sometimes I get so confused because there's so much news. It's so irrational. It's so nefarious. It's so corrupt and manipulated. Sometimes I really almost have to go eeny, meeny, miny, mo. And when I have that period that I'm not on the air, I have to go through my articles probably 4 or 5 times to delete articles that I know I won't have time for. And I always don't have time for all of them. Always. It's just, and we've talked about this privately and publicly. Folks, we really believe the next 6 months is going to make or break America. That when I say make or break, I mean options, I mean rule of law, I mean Constitution and Bill of Rights that over 1 million combat soldiers died for. You know, you really have to think when you see where our money's going, eugenics, wars, biochemical weapons, NGOs, dirty vaccines, cancer, all these fake foundations, and geoengineering on both counts, not just the, the stuff coming from the sky and the planes with accelerants burning up the earth, but the geoengineering of man-made bioweapons is pretty scary. And that's why so many big names are talking about depopulation. And that's why I talk about voluntary population control instead of being killed by poisoning our water and fluoride and estrogen and everything and pesticides, contamination of food, GMOs, hormone steroids, antibiotics. I mean, it's getting to the point, Vince, that there's so much bad news but needs to be discussed to wake people up and educate them, to give them ideas, solutions, and suggestions. But I feel, even though I enjoy being sarcastic, that's part of the New York in me, I enjoy telling jokes, I feel obligated to not waste too much time doing that. As Gwyneth would say, does that make sense, Vincent?
Since you're talking about cars, I was looking at, I'm just kidding. I was looking at some images of people reveling on beaches over the Decoration Day holiday, also known as Memorial Day. And these people were reveling on beaches and boardwalks and bars all across the country. That would be like Georgia, New Jersey, Florida, California, New York, Alabama, Texas, Missouri, Maryland. Hardly anyone was wearing a mask. Hardly anyone was social distancing. They were careless and carefree. And the GDP seemed to have no concerns about becoming infected nor infecting others. We have become and we have bred a reckless and narcissistic attitude in our people. We have. And so I'd like to read a comment of one of the people who commented on one of the articles that I read. This happened to be on dailymail.co.uk. And this guy was looking at or gal was looking at the images and said, quote, "It would appear that many Americans have forgotten the meaning and the purpose of Memorial Day, to solemnly respect, honor, and in some cases still mourn the lost lives of the servicemen and women given in the service of our nation. It's not supposed to be a happy beach party day. What a sad and lost country." Let me repeat that. What a sad and lost country. We have become, and that was the end of the comment. We have become narcissistic. We look in the mirror and we are just delighted at what we see. And the proof of that is, you just look at the news and you'll see people taking images of themselves with their smartphones, and then they grin like they won the lottery, and they look stupid with these. They stick their tongues out. I mean, it's just ridiculous, some of these images that Americans take of themselves. They are they're just enthralled with themselves, me first kinds of attitudes. And it's very, very sad. And what happened over Decoration Day / Memorial Day is just one example of how far we have fallen. Now, I have no intent to try to wake up those people. They're lost. They're dumb as a box of rocks. But others who are paying attention, who want to improve their lives, who want to control their own destiny, now those I'm interested in. Your thoughts, Rich?
Well, it's kind of a learned behavior. You know, when you see the powers that be, which we've talked about many times, I've put it in this context with many examples, hundreds of times, and you have the people at the top, especially on the Democrat blue side, literally caring mostly about and manufacturing their perception of their own self-importance and their own self-preservation. And look, I'll just give you a couple examples here. You know, here's a couple articles from Zero Hedge, or at least one of them is that Social Security will run out by 2029 because of COVID. And then here we have Californians in trouble because 340,000 public employees with over $100,000 paychecks are costing the taxpayers $45 billion. So you have these people in government literally manufacturing their self-importance and self-preservation. In other words, buying votes. You know, you have these government pensions, printing money, selling more bonds, more debt, and the people pay for all this in taxes and inflation. So the little people who are living off of Social Security at 1/4 to 1/20th of the luxurious government retirement paychecks, where 95% of these government workers are irrelevant, never mind essential. While they're unionizing with our taxpayer dollars, they're literally, the whole system has set up, whether it be crony capitalism, big corporations, or government, where the gains have been privatized and they're socializing the losses and the malinvestments. So we're combining a Cloward and Piven strategy with chaos and infighting, and I'm not condemning or condoning anything. I'm not predicting anything. My crystal ball broke many years ago. But they're using divide and conquer strategies, even from the worker standpoint, which is government workers versus private sector workers. And I can guarantee you right now, if they don't combine Social Security and government pensions to be in the same ballpark as far as value and money on a monthly paycheck, you are going to see citizens personally confiscating government worker wealth. Now, I'm not, again, condoning any violence, but we are going to be seeing this because just food for thought. We've seen banks getting bailed out by the taxpayers, all the big corporations, and yet the little guy has to get more money to put money down on bare land so he can live the way we keep talking about. But the powers that be want to push everybody into the cities. They want to make them rent. They want to make sure they don't have any. They're addicted to power, money, and control, and they don't want us to have self-sufficiency. We have to do something about this, or else self-preservation will be overbearing.
Yeah, don't be planting those gardens in your front yard. Yep, you'll get fined for that. My suggestion is go ahead and do it. And if they give you a hard time, give us a call. We'll beat them up. We'll be right back with Rich Scheben. Rich Scheben's with us. And, Rich, you know, there's a really interesting index that is hardly ever discussed in the mainstream media. At least I've never heard it discussed. And it's called the Federal Reserve National Activity Index.
Yeah.
And if my memory serves me correctly, this index was created in 1967, so it's about 53 years old. And it indicates about 85 financial-related activities, and it bundles them into one index. So you can look at a chart and see what's happening. You can look at the history of the chart to see whether the trend is up or down. And typically, it's designed so that 0 is no growth. If there's a minus number, that's bad. And if it's positive in the capitalistic system, that would be good. So like 1 point up would be okay. 1 point down, not so good. Well, this darn thing has crashed the most in at least 50 years. There are 85 individual data points in this index, and 79 of them are negative. 79 out of 85. That means only 6 of them are positive. Now, what is this thing? This is called the Chicago Fed National Activity Index. And it's a monthly index, and it's designed to gauge overall economic activity and the related pressures of inflation. It comes out on a regular schedule toward the end of each calendar month. Now, what is it? So it's the weighted average of 85 existing monthly indicators of national economic activity. It's constructed to have an average value of 0. So since economic activity tends toward growth over time, a positive index rating corresponds to growth above the trend, and a negative number would, or a negative index reading would correspond to growth below the trend. This thing is down more than it's ever been down. So in March, it was down roughly 5 points, which was a lot. In April, it's down almost 17 points, which is a record. This is just one more dot to really demonstrate, to prove that we are in the second Great Depression. Now, it's been called a greater depression than the first one, 1929 through 1945. I would submit this could be the greatest depression, the greatest of the United States of America. We may not survive this one. And it's brought to us for a lot of reasons. All of them by greed. All of them. The coronavirus, greed to dominate the world by infecting the world. Now, did it come from China or the United States or both? Well, probably China. And with one little invisible virus, they can take down the entire world's economy and drive us toward World War. Again, that would be World War number 3. Literally. Because what do you think people are now thinking? They've lost their jobs. Some have lost their houses. More are going to lose their houses. They're losing their cars. They can't feed themselves. The food supply is in jeopardy. Do you want to go to a restaurant and have some person cook a meal for you that may be infected and may give you the coronavirus that you may bring home to your mother and kill your mother? And if that happens, are you going to go and take a baseball bat and beat up that guy if he survives his infection at the restaurant? I mean, I'm not suggesting that you do that. I'm just asking, what are you going to do? Because I'd be pretty darn mad if some jerk in the kitchen was so greedy that he infected the server and infected the food and infected me and he killed my mother or father or brother or sister or wife or children. I'd be furious. Lucille, y'all hear that? Rich Scheben's with us, and we're talking about a bunch of things. One of them, the Chicago Fed National Activity Index, has crashed to the most ever since 1967, and it's way down. And it is an indicator of, well, a lot of things. Let's see if we can talk about it's about housing, it's about food, it's about production, it's about employment, unemployment. You put all that together and you look at the trend and you go, this is really, really bad. Rich, any comments about that?
Yes, I do. I want to mention a few articles confirming what you just said. I read that index often, and I want to talk about what's happening with printed money, and then I want to talk about an idea and solution that we can do something about this, okay? So first article is existing home sales continue to collapse to 9-year lows. Mortgage delinquencies, biggest monthly jump in history, and I've talked about delinquencies, defaults, and bankruptcies not going in the right direction. Billionaires in U.S. have grown $443 billion richer during the pandemic. So how many thousands of examples have I given over the last 9 years when all these people keep sticking up for their group, their hyphen, and their pronoun, while we're infighting and they're causing chaos, while certain groups are demanding to lower the bars of standards and expectations for economic reality, eliminating hard work, results, and qualifications, and demanding no more rule of law, the billionaires, while we're fighting each other, are getting wealthier by the billions. Next article, Herbalife selling $600 million in junk bonds to fund stock buybacks. I know this audience knows about stock buybacks because I've talked about it for hours, many times. Next article, Bank of America gets bullish, $1 trillion in cash to fuel stocks. Well, see, this is what we're doing. We're fueling the stocks. In other words, we're fueling the top 10% because the top 10% owns the great majority of stocks. Now, we have to remember that as they print money in a deflationary, stagflationary environment, they're creating inflation of necessities for the bottom 93%. Today, we are printing 3 times as much money at only half the value of purchasing power of 12 years ago. I want you to wrap your head around that. And they're given the impression that foreign buyers are buying U.S. dollars and treasuries and debt, but it really is the other way around. Foreigners are liquidating. They're selling U.S. securities. That means less buying and more selling, so you have to ask, what is the dollar going to be worth in the near future? Everything is corrupt and manipulated. And I've used this as an example before. You look at the ratio between silver and gold. How can the ratio between gold and silver be 100 to 1? When they mine gold, they pull out 8 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold. So how can it be 100 to 1? See, everything is corrupt, everything's manipulated, and the redistribution of wealth is going from the little guy to the greedy, as Vince so eloquently puts it. So the wealthy for years are manipulating the purchasing power for the elite and taking it away from the little guy. And about 1/3 of U.S. debt is held by foreigners. So you have to remember, if foreigners are actually liquidating, if they're selling U.S. securities, what direction are we going? See, the powers that be have mortgaged our country, and we keep bailing them out for malinvestment while they're sticking money in their own pocket, often indirectly, but sometimes directly and very obvious. So here's my idea. And we have to remember that political correctness not only destroys truth, not only destroys humor, telling a joke, taking a joke, not only delegitimizes work, the rule of law, and gives immunity and protection and liability protection to the most corrupt companies in the country and the world, giving free lunch to the elite and using divide and conquer strategies against us. But we are being eliminated for options, for wealth, for survival. I mean, one of the articles I have in here where suicide attempts in the last month is higher than the last year. Despair is not in the benefit of the little people. So my idea is as follows. Instead of giving all this money to Bank of America, to BlackRock to buy ETFs, which is supposed to be illegal, let's bail out the middle class for a change. Let's say Tom, Dick, and Harry, Sue, and Jane, they own a house or a piece of property. But their buyers, the database of buyers is getting limited because 80% of people live paycheck to paycheck. And all these people want to get out of the urban, suburban areas and have a little hobby farm like Vince and I talk about all the time so they can control their nutrition. They can build skill sets, have a garden, raise animals, maybe a little hunting and fishing, maybe live off-grid. But a lot of people don't have the initial investment availability. So when Tom, Dick, and Harry, Sue, and Jane sell a house or sell a piece of land, they hold the paper for a year, year and a half. Then the U.S. Treasury / Fed, and since they've combined forces, that's why I'm saying that, pays out the middle-class seller in a balloon payment, say a year, year and a half down the road. But in the meantime, that could be a government institution or department. Instead of giving all this money, all these times to bail out the wealthiest of the wealthy, we can actually give tangibility in land in lieu of some type of paper. So the Federal Reserve right now, they're using the coronavirus as an excuse to buy up everything. But they're only buying up things that benefit the elite. Let's buy up some things that benefit the poor and the middle class who are trying to get into a lifestyle, trying to make their health and their families better off, trying to eat nutritious food and have clean, non-contaminated water that's not full of 200 chemicals like chlorine and fluoride. Debt and deficits are being inflated by design and often to inflate stocks and equities. Again, benefiting the top 10% at best of wealth. So, in other words, how are we going to save the middle class? They're literally putting the heads of the middle class on the chopping block to save the stock market, to save government pensions. And I've talked about delegitimizing work so often. I'm going to go off into a little tangent here, Vince. I mentioned about, we all know who Lavoy Finicum is. He was shot by, I believe, the FBI, and evidence was withheld. Well, I saw a YouTube video of Lavoy's daughter. And this Judge Sullivan was literally starting a precedent called sovereign immunity doctrine. If we don't, basically, the powers that be are giving brown shirt abilities and powers, mercenary privileges to our law enforcement, and they're corrupting it. They're corrupting our law enforcement. We know what they've done to the FBI, to the CIA, to the DOJ. No one believes a word that comes out of their mouth. So if they're going to create a doctrine called sovereign immunity, rule of law will all be bought and paid for. And I've given many, 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 many examples of this. When you have people demanding to look, I've literally connected the dots. When you have people demanding to lower the bars of standards and expectations for what group they come in, and hard work, effort, proven results, and qualification means less than it ever has. And those people who are demanding those lower bars of standards, doubting their own value, creating an economic hole, so now they're hooked like a fish, so they got to protect their ego, protect this Democrat Party, protect nobility, protect false humanity and democracy and all this stuff. So they demand no protection, rights, or restitution of the law for people who are negatively affected to give zero checks on runaway power, while enabling and protecting the most corrupt companies in the country with liability immunities. We have sold out to the highest bidder and given free lunch to the elite at every level in every organization at the top. And this is why so many people have said nothing when we see high-level lawless bureaucrats receiving kickbacks, especially under the guise of foreign aid. The Democrats abusing power, corruption, racketeering, leaks, espionage, treason, sedition, fraud, malicious, nefarious use of power, and partisan bias. And how many people are standing up to this? I see President Trump, I see Judicial Watch. There's a few people here and there, like some of the people on this show. But when we have forced tyranny, when we see totalitarianism heading our way, full speed ahead with no brakes, that means today the people have no protection, no rights or restitution under the law. Everything is just a Ponzi scheme created by professional pot stirrers to guarantee divide and conquer strategies. And our options and opportunities become eliminated. And technology is being used as weapons, as tools for the plutocracy against us. You better speak up, folks, and I mean everybody. Whether you do it publicly, nationally, locally, in writing, however you do it. We better speak up or else we are going to lose everything that our ancestors fought for. We cannot allow the brainwashing, the hypocrisy, and the double standards. You know, here's a couple of examples. Gretchen Whitmer declares a gay, I'm not sure what this means, BDSM, I'm sure it's something weird, with glory holes, an essential business, while she shuts down real essential businesses. But yet, her husband asked for special help to launch her boat while she's demanding a lockdown for the people. And yet thousands evacuated from a central Michigan county after 2 dams fell when the dams were revoked for safety and they didn't pass the dam license for flood flows. So what the Democrats are doing is not only hypocrisy and double standards, but they're not even putting money into infrastructure or for the people. They are literally putting the people's lives in danger to put your tax money into propaganda hoaxes, false flags, and lies and gaslighting so they can get elected and go back in power. Vince, I can go on this horse all day, but
well, I'll tell you what. You mentioned speak up. Well, the governor of Michigan's husband, they own a boat, and he wanted his boat put in the water for Memorial Day.
Yeah, I just said that.
And yeah, I know. And he was told by the marina that it would take. I couldn't get it done in time. And they said, "Well, would it help if I'm the husband of the governor? But would that help?" That's what these people are like. Rich Scheben's with us in Montana. And since, Rich, you mentioned we must speak up, here's something that some of us may not know. So I went to the internet and I typed in who owns the Federal Reserve? Who owns the Federal Reserve? And I went to their website. You figure, well, they probably will tell us who owns the Federal Reserve, right?
I'll
Federal
tell you.
Reserve. Well, hang on just a second. FederalReserve.gov, right? This is the Federal Reserve's website. And it says, quote, the Federal Reserve is not owned, in quotes. They use the word owned in quotes. Quote, the Federal Reserve System is not, quote, owned, end quote, by anyone. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913 by the Federal Reserve Act to serve as the nation's central bank. The Board of Governors in Washington, D.C. is an agency of the federal government, reports to and is directly accountable to Congress. It goes on toward the bottom of this page, and it says the reserve banks are not operated for profit. Then that's their webpage. Now, what if you go to another webpage, and there's one that has some information by Thomas D. Schauf, S-C-H-A-U-F, copyright 1992. So this is not recent, and so the information is dated. But it says here who actually owns the Federal Reserve central banks. The ownership of the 12 central banks is a very well-kept secret, but it's been revealed. And who are some of them? Well, this is where the shock comes in, class. Now we're talking about the Central Bank of the United States, right? Who owns it? Rothschild Bank of London.
Yep.
Warburg Bank of Hamburg. Rothschild Bank of Berlin. Lehman Brothers of New York. Now they folded. Lazard Brothers of Paris. Kuhn Loeb Bank of New York. Israel Moses Bank of Italy, Goldman Sachs of New York, Warburg Bank of Amsterdam, Chase Manhattan Bank of New York. So, who is enriching themselves on the backs of the hard-working American people through inflation, money printing, and lending money to the U.S. government at interest? Who's doing that? Well, I just told you, Rothschild Bank of London, Warburg Bank of Hamburg, etc. Are you shocked? You should be. Because on the Federal Reserve's website, it says, quote, "The Federal Reserve System is not owned by anyone," end quote. And that's correct. That is absolutely, positively correct. It's not owned by anyone. It's owned by a bunch of international banks, corporations. It's not owned by anyone. It's owned by corporations. For profit. But yet they say they are not for profit. So we taught many classes here at USA Prepares on Newspeak and Doublespeak. That is a prime example of both Newspeak and Doublespeak. The Federal Reserve System is not, quote, owned, end quote, by anyone. That's what they say. And they're absolutely right, because they twist language. Any comments, Rich Scheben?
Well, yeah, the Fed looks at, speaking of doublespeak, they look at soft data, surveys, consumer confidence, focus groups, subjective emotional opinions manufactured by the elite to see how far they can turn reality into fantasy. I mean, right now they're printing $4 of new debt to create $1 of GDP, and it's even worse now, especially when GDP is 70% of our consumption, and that's why all the numbers are going south. The central bank's goal is to save the banks, save the stock market and Wall Street, and to save the status quo. In other words, create a caste system where you have no options and no rule of law to protect you. The bars of standards and expectations for a job has been demoted so far down that nobody can control their own destiny anymore. And when we have certain groups giving protection and liability immunity to the most corrupt corporations, government entities in the world, there's no chance. There's no hope. That's why I hope hopefully somebody in the White House listened to the idea that I came up with about holding the paper and then ballooning out the sellers for the little people to save the middle class and to give people ideas and solutions on being more self-sufficient. I realize that the powers that be don't want that, but we're getting to the point where, suicides, all the unit of measure of despair, drug use, alcohol, obesity, which kills 40,000 people per month, obesity-related diseases. I mean, there's so many units of despair that's just destroying them. We need to change this, and we need to speak up. We need to stand up.
You mentioned CFR. Yeah, you mentioned CFR, Council on Foreign Relations. Remember Erin Burnett? She was on TV. She was one of those gals, those pretty gals that I was one of the talking heads. She was a financial analyst for Goldman Sachs. And she's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Pretty gal, steering us all in the wrong direction. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Rich Scheben's with us, live in Montana. And he mentioned the governor of Michigan's husband, who wanted to put the family boat, in the water for Memorial Day. And the quote is, he said to the people at the dock, "I'm the husband to the governor. Will this make a difference?" End quote. And why did he say that? Because they said, we can't put your boat in the water. We've been backlogged, and you're on the list, but he wanted to be moved up. Me first. Narcissistic. Self-important. That's what it appears to be like to me. So what's happening across America is people have had it. They've absolutely had it. They've had it with Bill Gates. They've had it with pretty much everything that the government has done. Lockdown, no lockdown, lockdown, no lockdown. They've had it with, you can catch it, from, I'm talking about the virus, from touching something that's been handled by someone before, minutes before, hours before. They keep changing their mind. 6 feet, 27 feet distance. No one knows what to do because the information is contradictory. There are reports on the internet that we've passed the worst of it. And then there are reports that we haven't passed the worst of it. There are reports that the numbers are undercounted, meaning the deaths. Then there are reports that they're overcounted. So it's really, really difficult to figure out what's going on. So what we've been trying to do for years is to teach people how to think for themselves. Because you absolutely, positively cannot believe what you read, hear, and learn from the internet or in mainstream media. And if you think that the economy is going to rebound, and then you find out that the facts, such as the Chicago Fed National Activity Index, is the worst it's ever been, which is the sum of over 85 actually, individual indicators. If you put all that together, and that's employment, unemployment, food, spending, earning, put all that together, and it's really negative more than it's ever been. And yet, the media is telling you that, the worst is over and we're going to be doing fine. You got to have your head examined. We're not going to be fine for a long time, a really long time. So it's back to basics. It's make sure that you have food security, meaning enough food, enough water, and you could have gotten out of Dodge. Now, if you did get out of Dodge and you've done what Rich Scheben and I have been talking about for years, not quite 10 years, but darn close. If you have done that, I'd love to hear about it on Thursday. Give me a call and let me know what you've learned about what you've learned by trying what we have suggested you consider doing here at USA Prepares. Have you gotten out of Dodge? Have you built your own garden? Have you started working on your own cars? Have you quit your job and become an entrepreneur? Have you retired and pursued some of the things that Rich has been talking about, and Gwyneth and I and the rest of the faculty here at USA Prepares? Did it work or not? So on Thursday, please give me a call, 866-582-9933. I don't want to talk about things other than that. Just if you've tried some of the things that we've suggested, has it been a flop? Has it been a failure? Has it been a success? And why do you think so? Rich, any comments about that?
I do. What I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, Vince, I'm separating articles right here. You talked about basically the Democrat blue state hypocrisies and double standards and things like that. And you also talked about what to believe regarding the coronavirus. So I would like to address that with up-to-date articles, if I may, please.
Of course.
Thank you. Okay, first article, folks. Joe Biden, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black, unquote. This hit the airwaves a few days ago, big time. Biden audio leaked. Details, $1 billion offer to fire Burisma prosecutor investigating Hunter. How come, folks, it's normal when Joe Biden can use $1 billion of U.S. taxpayer dollars, this is regarding Ukraine, to stop investigations against his son, but it's an impeachable offense if Donald Trump inquires about it. And at the same time, Obama and Biden are spying on Trump and his people, running a coup and shadowing him around the world, committing treason and sedition. How is this possible in America? Next article. Biden says he called for a pandemic shutdown 1 week earlier than Trump. No, he didn't. It's all hoaxes, propaganda, false flags, lying, gaslighting. That's all it is. That's what the mainstream media is. That's it. Next article, left-wing columnist. I would vote for Joe Biden if he boils babies and ate them. Nice. Isn't it great to be a Democrat? Tolerance. Joe Biden can boil babies and eat them. Now that's tolerance, and she will still vote for him. You betcha. That's what we want. Next article, ripping off taxpayers for vacations at North Carolina beach home. This is the governor of Virginia. He spent 65 days funded by the taxpayers to go to his beach house on you. Congratulations, taxpayers. Next article. Susan Rice says White House counsel instructed her to write a strange Flynn email. How are we living in this world, this Twilight Zone episode, where Stacey Abrams, as per the Washington Post, is a supermodel, and Susan Rice can write emails to herself to practice her writing skills? We are being biologically, chemically, economically, psychologically, technologically, and politically poisoned and controlled. Next article. Ilhan Omar. I will vote for Biden even though I believe Tara Reid. And Tara Reid is the woman that Joe Biden says was fingering her. And we're on AM and FM. That's about as far as I can go. And remember all these comments about Donald Trump when he said privately about grabbing something, when Joe Biden literally fingered this woman, and this woman is, well, she'll probably get some restitution under the table in a back room and not be paid publicly. Next article, Planned Parenthood.
Rich, the government has a fund for this. They have a fund to pay off people whom claim abuse by Congress. Senators,
yes, I call it the Bimbo Slush Fund. I've mentioned it many times. Since the late 90s, this fund has been present. Now, it might not be on paper today. They might have it disguised under some other different term. But they've had this fund for many, many decades. Next article, Planned Parenthood affiliates receive $80 billion in PPP loans. So congratulations, folks. The institution that basically was created to reduce the black population. And Margaret Sanger admitted this, video, audio, and transcript. And you taxpayers are funding them for $80 million in PPP loans, which most of it they probably won't even pay back. And the media, NGOs, are outraged by the country of Hungary that now defines sex as biological, what you're born with. Can you believe it? People are using logic and common sense over political correctness. How dare they? Okay, and now let me mention a few articles, Vince, regarding what to believe on the COVID deaths. Washington State admits to counting gunshot victims as COVID deaths. These are all published articles in the public domain, folks. Over 20 million people entered the UK with no COVID-19 health checks. That means countries are allowing them to come in with no health checks while quarantining our people. This is a totalitarian, submissive takeover. They want to break your will. Next article, Grandma Killer. Cuomo sent 4,300 patients back to nursing homes despite positive COVID-19 tests. DeSantis saved thousands while Cuomo murdered thousands because DeSantis from Florida kept them in hospitals. You people who lost your parents and your grandparents, you ought to sue the living bejesus out of Cuomo.
Cuomo is known as the grandma killer.
Yep, that's what I just, Yep.
Rich, I just want to let you know we've got Bob on hold in Michigan with an update about the recall of Governor Whitmer.
Okay, good deal. One more article, and then I'll let Bob take over here. Amy Klobuchar finally and reluctantly admits that her HCQ saved her husband's life. See, we're not getting truth here. We're just getting propaganda to hold the narrative. That's all it is. I mean, even doctors like Tom McGremis is saying that the risk of dying from this is now 0.01%. And all these projections and modeling have lost credibility. Nothing matters anymore. And they're giving this Moderna, these biotech small companies, all this money from the taxpayers and investors to come out with a vaccine. Do you really feel that you can trust these vaccines, folks, when you have the biggest names and the wealthiest people in the world demanding population decrease? Really? Okay, Vince, I'll stop my rant here, and you can have Bob on for an update.
Yeah, Bob in Michigan. Welcome.
Hi, I just thought there is a recall petition on the site is called change.org, and according to their latest, they have 346,603 signatures for a recall. They're trying to get to 500,000. So, again, it's change.org is where you can sign. You could sign the petition.
Okay, Bob, we're going to be going into a break in just a few seconds. I want to let you know that I did get your email. I will, if you give me your number, I'll call you this weekend. Do you have anything else that you want to share with our class?
Yes. Well, if you hold me over, I got something else.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay. All right. Rich, Scheben and I and Bob will be right back after these few short commercial announcements. And thank you for calling in, Bob. We'll be with you in just a couple minutes. Rich Scheben's with us, and Bob is with us in Michigan. We're talking about the recall on Governor Whitmer. By the way, Bob, I do not have your phone number, so I responded to your email. Please respond with your phone number, and I'll call you this weekend.
Sure.
Please continue about the recall, please.
Well, no, I had a different thing. I'm just a comment on this whole virus.
Okay.
Or plandemic, as it has been labeled. I think we're all familiar with the Die Hard movies.
Yeah.
Well, in every one of those movies, it was some criminal genius that concocted this completely convoluted and tricky plot that just, got everybody totally confused while they pulled off a robbery or whatever crime they wanted to do. So, in other words, I was thinking, if they can come up with plots like that for a movie, why couldn't somebody come up with a real plot like that in the real world, which I think is what this whole virus scam is.
Well, absolutely, Bob. I mean, their whole agenda was to crash the economy, to eliminate free market supply and demand, get rid of cash, centralize some type of government crypto, stop patriotic, peaceful assembly, control technology, make us submissive, break our will, eliminate voting by mail.
Yep.
I mean, it's all the agenda is, increase big tech, make us starve, eliminate our skill sets, depopulation, eliminate free speech, force vaccines on us, and give us immunity passports, force lockdowns, house arrest, delegitimize work. I mean, we have talked about this. The agenda is very plain. The telegraphing every punch is very obvious. And, we really appreciate you talking about the recall on this frickin' corrupt governor. When people are willing to be bought and paid for the elite agenda and not the people's agenda, they are going to have to be taken care of one way or another. I'm not condoning the other, but I'm saying that we're to the point where we don't even have protection or restitution under the rule of law in this country anymore. And the liability immunity is going to the wrong people, to the most corrupt.
Yeah.
So what should the penalty be for people who have been elected to represent our interests, or people who are government employees who've been hired to represent our interests, both of which have been paid by we the people. What should the penalty be when they lie to us?
Well, that's a good question, Vince, because our judges and lawyers have been bought and paid for as well. And
I have an answer. I have an answer to that.
Okay.
Execution. When someone lies to us on a scale that hurts people, they should be executed. Now, for example, I have said that the coronavirus from day one is real, and we should prepare to survive it. That's number one. Number two is after we survive it, then Lucille can come with us and we can go talk to these people. I've said that and I haven't changed my position one iota, that any and all of the conspiracy theories may actually be true. And I believe any and all of them are true, including the eugenics, the forced vaccinations, the collapse of the economy, the reset of the economy, the loss of houses, property to banks, the collapse of manufacturing, all of these things, depriving people of their rights, the vast spying network above us, alongside us. I mean, I'm talking about the cell phones. I'm talking about 3G, 4G, 5G. I'm talking about GPS. I'm talking about the Internet of Things. I'm talking about cars talking to cars. I'm talking about forced obsolescence. All of these things have ramped up so fast, we can't even read about them as fast as they're happening. We are being taken down. And of course, it's really simple to see that this virus is the reason that we're being taken down. So what should the penalty be for people who lie to us, who work for the government, who allegedly represent our interests, and they don't? Execution. Bob?
Same thing as sedition or treason.
Absolutely.
So you hit the nail on the head there.
Bob, do you have any other comments that you'd like to share with us after the break?
No, that's it.
Bob, thanks so much for the call. Rich Scheben's with us, and we've been talking about the penalty for government employees and elected people lying to us, and I mentioned execution. Now, you know that the police can lie to you, right? But you're not supposed to lie to them. They can say that's obstructing justice if you lie to them. So why do we allow this? Why do we allow a system where the police can lie to you? So if you go to a website, and just type in, can the police lie to you? Okay. You'll find out that, the police are allowed to lie to you, and, people think that if you ask an undercover cop if he's a cop, he has to tell you. That's completely false. If you think about it practically, then everyone would go around anytime committing crime, going to jail, saying, are you a cop? And the system would fail. So police can lie to you. And it happens in lots of different ways. The police can arrest a person and say, okay, we've got your partner in the next room, and he's spilling his guts. Now, if you come clean, we're going to be easier on you. Well, first of all, the police don't have the power to come to make it easier on you. That's the prosecutor's decision. So law enforcement, they used to be called police. Law enforcement are actually trained to deceive you, to get you to admit things. That's what they do. They snipe. They're peeping Toms. They try to entrap you. And yet, we allow this. We allow them to lie to us. It's unacceptable. We should not allow them to lie to us. We should set up websites across the country that when a cop lies to you, you get his picture with your cell phone and you put it on the website and you say, here's the cop, here's his name, here's his address, here's his phone number, here's where he lives, here's his family, here's his address, here's a picture of his house, here's what he did, and click here and you can watch the video of it. Imagine if that happened. They would be a lot more polite, wouldn't they? And they'd be a lot less likely to lie to us. But I guess we're going to have to wait for the reset. And we're seeing the evidence that it's coming. We're seeing these protests. We're seeing armed protesters. The government is actually afraid of us now. They are. Because they've seen that people are willing to show up with AR-15s, AK-47s, grenade launchers, rocket launchers in protests. They're starting to realize...
May I comment on what you just said?
One second. Yes, they're starting to realize that what the Imperial Japanese Navy thought in 1941 is actually true. There are a whole bunch of Americans that will come out behind every blade of grass and take action. And they're pushing us just about to that point. We are on the edge of the second American Revolution, brought to you by your government. Yes, Rich.
Well, what is brought to us by is the elite controlling people. Like I mentioned, what Lavoy Finnegan's daughter mentioned earlier today, who was shot by the FBI and evidence have been withheld. They are starting what's called a sovereign immunity doctrine. Basically, they are legitimizing brown shirts and mercenaries who are wearing badges. And this is why I always talk about practice what you preach laws. And we have to ask ourselves a question. Will the police arrest these governors and Democrats who are literally trying to conduct cheat by mail voting? Talk about illegitimate. I mean, there's a few articles I want to mention here. DNC Chair Perez says Trump is trying to steal election with cheat by mail fight. Next article, Kamala Harris, Trump attempting to suppress the vote. You see what they're doing here? Merkley, GOP opposing mail-in voting to stop people of color from voting. Again, the victim group status card. They are insulting and degrading every group they can possibly get. Hold up. Next article. Breaking. South Philly elections judge pleads guilty to taking bribes and stuffing ballot boxes. Next article. Massive problem with absentee ballot counting in Wisconsin, and Democrats want to make this nationwide. DOJ, Democrats paid Pennsylvania election officials to stuff ballot box. And here's an article. Donald Trump threatens to punish Michigan for governor for mailing absentee ballot applications to voters. Absolutely. We need to punish them. We need to arrest them. They need to be indicted. They need to be in prison. This is getting, every institution we have, colleges even. Professors around America have been caught selling secret research to Chinese communist regime, and the mainstream media doesn't even report on it. And there's a list of people who have been caught. I've read it. And there's questions over Chinese influence emerging about Joe Biden's charitable organizations refuse to disclose funding. But yet they want Donald Trump's tax returns. It's over the top. Colorado State offers $1,500 for coronavirus aid checks to illegal alien students. So for people who've never been to college, who have paid off their own college debts, the same people want you to pay the huge leverage of worthless degrees where 90% are worthless, of malinvestment. They want you to pay for this and the cost shifting for education and for health care and for car insurance, because the illegal immigrants won't pay for that. We have to pay for that too. But the wealthy folks can bribe universities for their own kids and literally buy scholarships, buy test scores, and even buy degrees. And if that is not enough, Washington State loses more than $1 billion to unemployment fraud scammed by Nigerians. Our government is non-existent. It is beyond workable. It's too corrupt. And the people in there are taking every penny of the taxpayer dollars to fund their big pensions, benefit packages, and salaries, to fund their manufacturing perception of self-importance, and to fund their self-preservation. 95% of government needs to go. Needs to go. And if the money would benefit the poor and middle class, like some of the ideas and solutions we've said on the show today and over the years, we would be a much happier country. But no, the powers that be want to reduce population. They have an addiction to power, money, and control. They want to kill everybody. Everything's propaganda, hoaxes, false flags, and lies. Everything. We are beyond 1984, beyond Hegelian dialectic, beyond Twilight Zone, what any writer for the Twilight Zone could have come up with. They have literally delegitimized work and given free lunch to the elite and taken all the money from the bottom 93% and given it to super wealthy using divide and conquer strategies. And we have to put people's feet to the fire. We have to have practice what you preach laws. We have to end the brainwashing, the hypocrisy, and the double standards. People are being played, used as pawns. You're being duped, especially for those people who are sticking up for your group, your hyphen, and your pronoun. We need to start being Americans, because the people who are on welfare and food stamps get pennies compared to what big corporate America and government workers get. All monetary benefits. And there's making precedents around every corner with tax loopholes and owning all the assets. And the biggest mouths out there, the Hollywoods, the Gates, the big corporations, they are the beneficiaries of the nepotism and the entitlements and the biggest inheritances in the world. And this is why we're losing biologically, chemically, technologically, while being psychologically neutered. We're allowing the elite to poison us against ourselves. And we need a proportionate response to and for the people waking up. I realize in the last year it's been exponential, but the response for speaking up and doing something about it against these elites and the technocracy and the big tech surveillance and censorship something has to be done about it, because they're going to use this mail-in voting and rig the whole system. And then there's going to be no credibility and despair. You think despair is bad now? People are losing everything, losing their jobs, losing their way to control their own destiny. I mentioned earlier in the show how in the last month we've had as many suicide attempts as we've had in the last year. You think despair is bad now? We got to stop fighting against each other. Forget about what group you're in, what skin pigmentation shade, what gender you are, what gender you identify as, who you have sex with, what sexual orientation, what religion you are. They're using it against us to sway public opinion and manufacture perception, especially of pity and guilt. They're rewarding America for mediocrity, and they're insulting the same people. They're insulting your work ethic, your ability, and your intelligence. You've been degraded. You've been disrespected. You don't empower a nation or group by lowering the bars of standards and expectations for your job. This is to make us submissive, to make us infight, to create chaos, to break our will. And that's why there's hardly any opportunity or knowledge or rewards or productivity or innovation available for the little people. The supply chain for everything I just mentioned has been cut off by the same people who are doing treason and sedition and fraud and corruption and racketeering and espionage. Vince, I know I could continue with this rant all day, but I know we're running out of time, so I'll give you a little airtime, buddy.
Well, since you're exposing what's really happening, let's talk about the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. It's a book that was published. The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. And there are 24 protocols. Number 1 is the basic doctrine. Number 2 is economic wars. Number 3, methods of conquest. Number 4, materialism replacing religion. Number 5, despotism of modern progress. Number 6 is the takeover technique. Number 7 is worldwide wars. Number 8, provisional governments. Number 9, re-education. 10, preparing for power. 11, the totalitarian state. 12, control of the press. Control of the press. Let me say it differently. Control of the press. 13, distractions. Let me say it differently. Distractions. Number 14, assault on religion. 15, ruthless suppression. 16, brainwashing. 17, abuse of authority. Abuse of authority. 18, arrest of opponents. 19, rulers and people. 20, financial program. 21, loans and credit. 22, the power of gold. So if you go to eBay and you type in Protocols of Zion, that's all I have to type in, Protocols of Zion, you'll find a whole bunch of offerings. And this book was first published in 1897. That's 123 years ago. And it talks about how the Zionists can take over the world. The plan, what do they need to do it? They delineate this. Now, they say this is a work of fiction. I don't think so. I have a copy. I have a real old copy of this particular book. And it's not quite the original, but it might be from the 1920s. And it talks about what's needed. In order to take over the world, the Zionists need to control education, finance, media, medicine, government, manufacturing, and more. That's what they need to do. Jumpin' Joe, I heard him say on a video many years ago, it's like, hey, I'm paraphrasing. He said, hey, I'm with you guys. I'm a Zionist. That's what Jumpin' Joe said. He is part of the group of elite who want to run the show. That's what he said. I don't know if it's been deleted or not, but I heard him say it. I saw him say it. Not in person, but in the media. Before we got into twisting the media and photoshopping and, those kinds of things. It was before that. Many years ago. So, Rich, any comments about the protocols? Have you read them?
Well, I've read them, and I've read many excerpts on the air from Mark Zelensky, Frankfurt School, Cloward and Piven, the Communist Manifesto. I've read a lot of this stuff on how group identity politics has set the stage for government interventions, confiscation, redistribution of wealth, loss of individual rights. And I know I've mentioned many times before how the left is always calling Trump and us deplorable, irredeemable, patriot nationalists Nazis. But yet, when you look at the communist, socialist, authoritarian, tyrannical dictatorship, totalitarian, fascist state that we're heading into, when you really look at who is producing these strategies and directions, it shows that the people have been duped because the left wants to control the media. They hate citizen journalists because they hate the new media. They hate the alternative media. They hate truth. They don't want facts. They want to keep people dumbed down and believing the narrative. And they want to control the police. That's why they've let Antifa be like pseudo mercenaries on the streets in the blue cities. They want to get rid of due process. And a great example is when they brought out that Blasey Ford. They basically wanted to get rid of due process, and now Brett Kavanaugh, for the rest of his life, will be known as a gang rapist. No evidence, no nothing. Even though every woman but one admitted that they were lying, there isn't even prison for these people. And they want government schools control the curriculum and not the parents. They want private invasion by police. They want strip searches. They want our lawyers and judges. We've given thousands of examples how they sold out the little people in the name of justice, and now they're trying to have voter and election fraud by this mail-in voting. I mean, we've gotten to the point where us citizens need to expect the government to work for us and not the way around. And it's not being anti-government. We're just anti-corrupt, manipulative, too big, overspending, incorporated elite control, anti-constitution government. And that's what Donald Trump has inherited. Now, I don't have a future. I don't have a crystal ball, folks. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm hoping that these declassifications that we've been calling for on this show and many through the alternative media occur. I hope that Barr and Durham get a backbone and are not bought and paid for and stick up for the rule of law and the Constitution. I hope a lot of things. And the next 6 months is going to determine where America goes. We're about to lose our freedoms and our liberties in the name of every bogus word where the definitions have been weaponized and taken as tools to delegitimize the whole process of America. And it's going to be very interesting where we're going to go. And I really think the common denominator on the direction we go, Vince, is if people stop being the silent majority, stop thinking America is a spectator sport, and actually start speaking up and doing something about it, and reading the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and understanding what their rights are, and putting people's feet to the fire. Vince?
Yeah, and no knock warrants need to stop right now. Those are those warrants where the police bash the door in with guns ready to shoot, and innocent people have been killed by no knock warrants. It's absolutely outrageous that we allow that. It needs to stop right now. Any representative who says that no knock warrants are good should be removed from office pronto right now. Rich Scheben, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Vince. Thank you.